5 reasons why people really have an intense fear of death. Fear of pain is certainly in consideration, and you can see this in people that are working with people in pain, that they really want to be alleviated of their pain. Now, we're looking at a bodily level, but also there's a emotional pain that's connected with death and dying. The idea of fear of loss, that there is a separation. And separation is a pain. We can see it in children when they're separated from the mother. There's an experience of pain. They'll often cry. That is a very real pain for the child. There's also a fear of meaninglessness, that the idea of death, that if we die, that we no longer have purpose. We no longer have meaning. We're not loved anymore. And this, in a sense, can bring about a feeling of failure. Also the idea of the fear of the unknown. That death, although we see it constantly, it literally surrounds us in our lives, either in an immediate sense, with the death of close people to us, or in a distant sense. But death really surrounds us in nature and in our own selves. And then finally, the idea of fear of non-being. The idea that we will ultimately not exist. That this is very frightening for people. And you can go to the next one. It will really relief to keep everybody. You can get a lot of the philosophical problems of life answered by just reading the comments. This one here is good grief, trapped in a doghouse by an icicle. I'll bet if I make just the slightest move, it'll crash down and kill me. I don't want to die. I'm too young to die. I'm too nice to die. I'm too me to die. In other words, the death of the ego, the idea that this formulation of who we are. I'm Dr. So-and-so. I'm Professor so-and-so. I'm the wife of so-and-so. This attachment to who we are in something that really, ultimately, has no permanency whatsoever. And the finest example I can see of it is Alzheimer's disease. Is literally when the consciousness is effaced from the intellect. When a person literally no longer has any awareness in a conscious way of who he was, of who his loved ones are. Tragic disease, but ultimately a beautiful metaphor also for the nature of ego and the nature of consciousness. So we can move to the next. These are just some examples of really the idea of death denial in our culture. Just euphemisms we use for death: kick the bucket, succumbed, wasted, checked out, eternal rest, laid to rest, pushing up daisies, was a goner, withered away in the arms of the Father, gave it up, it was curtains, bit the dust, resting in peace. All of these ways in which we euphemistically describe death. The word is almost literally not brought up in polite company. And when we speak about death, when we speak about people that die, we tend to use these euphemisms. We don't like to really just look at the bare bones of the matter. Just look at the fact that somebody has died. And so you can move to the next one. Looking at the idea of physical death, according to the Harvard Medical Schools, and I think these are the guidelines that are being nationally used, about actually what determines death. And fascinating for me in the hospitals that doctors, nurses can't really say whether a patient's dead or not. We need a doctor to come in and declare death. And the idea that death is a death of brain activity. We do check the brain waves if they're no longer there. The heart and blood, the circulatory system, that the heart has stopped. Death of the nervous system, that we don't get any reflexive responses from the individual. And then the death of the breath, the lungs, that there's no longer any breath. Now, if we look at psychological death, I think that there's a definite correlation here. If we look at the death of brain waves, psychologically, this is what can be termed as a cognitive death. That people literally die, they stop thinking. like dead at 25, buried at 75. And there are a lot of people that literally choose to stop thinking in their lives, to stop reflecting. Now, I personally think part of the problem of modern society is that we are overdosed with reality. T.S. Eliot said that human beings cannot take too much of reality. It's something that literally overwhelms us. And one of the ways of dealing with this overdose of reality is literally to die a psychological death, to become numb to the experience of life. When we are literally living in a country where some of us are enjoying extraordinary fruits, the quote-unquote American dream, and yet we see on the news areas of the earth that are literally ravaged by war, by hunger, by poverty, by suffering that is really beyond our imagination at this point in time unless we've been in that situation. So to watch that on television, to see this day in and day out, to recognize that while some of us live in wonderful environments, there are others that live and really close to us, not that far away, that is a very numbing experience for many people. And so they choose to move into a psychological death. The next one, the heart and blood, is a type of emotional death, where people become dead to their emotions. They have no awareness of their feelings. They lose touch with how they are experiencing life. And this happens in human relationships between males and females. A man and a wife that really died to each other. There is an emotional death, and there can be a cognitive death. And then the death of the nervous system psychologically is the volitional death, when we literally move into the routinization, perfunctory performance of our lives, where literally, and this is sometimes termed as burnout, which is particularly high in the healthcare profession, that people literally become burned out. They go through the motions. Whatever that fire was that initiated their journey in the beginning is now quite literally burnt out. And they no longer have that flame that keeps them going, that keeps them moving. And then finally, the breath in the lungs is psychologically the intuitive paralysis, that we no longer have insight. We no longer literally perceive what is the meaning of events, what is the meanings of our lives, what do these things mean in the context of life itself. Now you can see also in Kubler-Ross's stages that the first one is similar to bargaining, and then the second is similar to anger, third depression, fourth denial. That is not her stages go. Actually, the first is usually denial, and then anger, and then depression, and then bargaining, and then acceptance. And bargaining is a fascinating attempt that people, like the man who was literally being pulled out by the tide, and he said, "Oh God, please, if you just send me a wave, I'll dedicate my whole life to you." And a wave comes, and as he's getting closer to shore, he says, "I'll dedicate half my life." And then he gets a little closer, and he says, "1/3." And by the time he gets back to the shore, he decides he's going to put some charity into the box on Sunday. So we do really bargain constantly, in a sense, whether we believe in God or not. I mean, people do bargain. There are many psychological bargainings going on. The idea of denial, which is really what is so fascinating about the human species, that despite the fact that death surrounds us, we do remain in a state of denial, is rather frightening. The next one. This is another way of looking at it: brain thinking, heart feeling, central nervous system sensation and breath, intuition, and then the next one. Now, this is the death that I think is the fascinating death. And this is the death that every single spiritual tradition, whether it be Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity in its more mystical tradition, Judaism, and Islam, and which is what I plan to emphasize, is the spiritual death. There are 5 reasons why people really have an intense fear of death. Fear of pain is certainly in consideration, and you can see this